So how do you do an estate plan for a blended family? I'm Michael Redden, and this is what we're going to be talking about today. If you have any questions or comments about it, please leave them down in the comments below. If you'd like to plan with me, go to reddenlawoffice.com and click on Schedule a Meeting. So it's pretty common nowadays that we're going to come across blended families. How are we going to define that? That's basically any family where there's a child involved for either husband or wife who is not the biological child of both people. And these does present some kinds of challenges when it comes to estate planning. We've got some relationships to kind of manage, and after the first spouse passes away, the spouse who passed away definitely wants to take care of the other spouse, and they usually also want to take care of their own children. Sometimes they feel very strong about the other children, take care of them too, but there can be tensions that come about in the family with that because not everyone has blood relation, even though they have their relationships as step parents and as spouses. Now, a lot of times what we've got to look at here is kind of what would happen if we didn't do any kind of planning. And I can tell you that it's an interesting kind of situation. If one spouse dies and there's no will or anything like that, that surviving spouse is going to get a life estate in the house if they weren't on the house, but they're also going to then only be able to get absolutely right around the first $250,000 of the estate, and the rest of it split between them and the children who aren't theirs. That way we kind of make sure that those children get something from their spouse that was blood relation, but that can present challenges when it comes to taking care of the spouse who's left behind. Because if they only can really access half of it for their maintenance and support and things like that, especially in their older age and retirement, that can present problems financially, much less those same problems with getting along together. There's also the other issue of it. If we were to just leave it all to the other spouse and things like that, we can hope and that other spouse would take care of our kids that aren't theirs, and that might be the intention all along many times. But once we're gone, we really don't know what's going to happen with the family and the relationships after us. We hope our kids are still going to get along with the other side of the family and things. We hope they're going to stay close. But it doesn't always happen. Sometimes they drift apart, especially if they don't have blood relation, because you were the thing that was holding everything together. What if that other spouse also then goes and remarries? If that spouse then doesn't remember your children in the will, then all of that, or if they don't get a will, then all of that money that you had and made and gave over to help them with support is now going to go to their new spouse or to their children, which may be fine, maybe what you intended. But families are complex nowadays. There may be one breadwinner, there may be two. You don't know how the money's going to kind of be split up. So it's kind of important then to maybe not go explicitly by those defaults we used to go with. And the law, when you don't have a will or a trust, is going to just assume or go with that traditional kind of thing where one spouse was the breadwinner, and when you pass away, we're going to give you that $250,000 and half of it, but the rest we're going to keep up for those kids. And that's just going to be the way that it goes, because the law is going to favor that blood relation over just the marital one. So how do we kind of deal with that? A lot of this is going to be you need to have an estate plan for one. Your will can override this. You can decide to give it all to that spouse in the will and trust that spouse and kind of go with that. Some of us have that kind of relationship. In your will, you can put things specifically aside for the kids that are yours and not, and then kind of take care of your spouse that way. We're giving them the rest. There's all those kinds of things that you can do. Another thing that you can do is you can leave these things into a trust, and where the trust will just say, hey, I'm going to take care of that spouse that's left behind. And only when that spouse left behind is gone and what's left, I'm going to give out to my kids and maybe their kids, and we're going to split it however that kind of way goes. And that way you can make sure that's not spent on, supporting that next spouse if they were getting remarried and things like that. You have a little bit more control over it. So a lot of times the answer is to do some kind of a trust, but definitely the answer is to have at least a will. We're not going to be able to control how people get along, and on some level, there's going to be a little bit of feelings that comes about when you're taking care of those people that aren't yours. I mean, they may be getting on great now and everything like that, but that hurt from losing you and things like that can open wounds, and that communication oftentimes isn't as well. So it's going to be a lot easier to handle if you did it than the law did it, or if if your spouse did it. Because if your spouse gets those things and then the children don't get what they feel like they deserve, or they don't agree with maybe some life choices and things later on, then that can cause animosity in the family, and those things can kind of stir up. First and foremost, we want to take care of everyone. Make sure they get everything they need medically, financially, and have that support. The next most important thing is to make sure that the family unit can kind of stay together, if that's what we're looking at, especially if it's a longer term marriage and people are there together in those things. And a lot of times this just comes down to really being something that a trust is the best kind of part for, whether that trust is made in your will or not. Put it into that trust, talk about taking care of that spouse, the things you want to be done and not, and then let it roll over to the kids. Or the other part, like I said, would be to carve some things out for your spouse, then put some things over into the children's names, either right away or into a trust, whether they're your kids, the ones that aren't your kids, or both, because then we've taken care of people getting something, and we've also taken care of the spouse. It's those competing kinds of interests that are hard to manage. We need to take care of that spouse, but we also have children in this mix, and we want that spouse to have a free life, free and full life, and that may be marrying again and creating more relationships that could be longer term, that are going to maybe have inheritance expectations and things like that, and managing all those things are kind of there. And when you think about that, even if your spouse is wanting to do it, it may not be fair really to put this on the spouse's shoulders. I'm just going to give you the money. You take care of it, manage everybody's relationships, make sure you take care of my kids, even if they go and remarry and have another family unit. Those kinds of competing relationships and competing things on their emotions and on their intentions is difficult. It'll be impossible to please everybody. It's going to be hard to please everybody even if we just have the one mixed family. But if they go on and remarry, it's going to be even harder for that to go. It's probably not really fair for that spouse that's left behind. So take that responsibility yourself. Take care of your children. Take care of what you want to provide to the children of your spouse and your spouse in your estate plan. You're the one passing away. It's your assets. They're your loved ones. Take that step. Take care of them. Take responsibility for them. Make sure they're taken care of. Don't leave it just on the other spouse, because life moves on and you don't know what the relationships are going to be like. You don't know what the feelings are going to be like. You don't know if they're going to remarry again and make it even more complicated. So, whether it's a will or a trust, get your plans, put them in place there, and put some thought into those things. It's really up to you. Now, if you have any other questions or comments about this, please leave them down below.